205. Freedom and Responsibility. Chalcedon Position Paper number 83, February 1987. Some years ago, while at the state capital of a southern state, I was asked to speak at the opening session of the House. Earlier, while in the office of the Speaker of the House, that man, with some dismay, expressed his fears for the future. Until then, said this elderly man, the legislature had met briefly every 2 years. Now it was by law meeting annually, and in session most of the year. He felt that both on the state and federal levels, a year-round legislature in Congress spelled destruction for this country and any other country adopting it. Any legislature in continuous session would be susceptible and radically vulnerable to the great evil of constant pressure from the largest lobby of all. At that time, it was commonly assumed that the largest lobby was the teachers' lobby or the labour unions. Not so, he said. It is the bureaucracy. They are always close at hand, always active, always full of ideas, and more numerous than all other lobbyists. I am glad, said the Speaker of the House, that I am too old to live long enough to see the full damage the bureaucracy's lobbies will do to the state and to the country. He could have added another factor to this danger from a bureaucracy. Every bureaucracy sees itself as the answer to all possible problems. Instead of the free workings of the people, of the marketplace, of the churches, families, and institutions of a society, the bureaucracy sees all solutions in terms of bureaucratic action and control. In terms of this, nothing is more dangerous to a bureaucracy than freedom, and the ideas of a bureaucracy and a free people are mutually contradictory. Having said this, I must add that bureaucracies arise when a people and their representatives in civil government abandon responsibilities in self-government. It is easy to rail against various bureaucracies, such as the Internal Revenue Service, the state tax commissions, land control agencies, and so on, but they exist because people have rejected the responsibility of freedom for license, for irresponsibility. Even more easily comes the excuse that a conspiracy is responsible for our plight. Conspiracies exist. They have always existed, but they only flourish when men will not govern themselves, when men seek something for nothing, and when men want a risk-free world. The risk-free life is slavery. Freedom always means risk, and when men seek to minimize risk, this means minimizing freedom. Controlling evil is justice. Controlling risk beyond a minimum means slavery. Today, we have the moral order reversed. Evil is given status and privilege. Abortion, homosexuality, adultery, fornication, and more all have legal status, and there are demands to legalize incest and other evils. At the same time, risk is termed evil and is punishable. Doctors are required to be perfect, even though the finest surgery involves risks. Our courts are clogged with cases filed by a people who want a risk-free, accident-free world. A non-risk world is a non-free world, and bureaucracies represent the will of the majority in action, creating a world without risks. The U.S. Congress is the U.S. people writ large, or perhaps small. The people delegate powers to Congress, and they then demand not the execution of justice, but the delivery of privileges, entitlements, grants, subsidies, welfare, and more from Congress. Congress in turn delegates its powers to the bureaucracy, together with the grant of vast sums of money to give the people what they want: security, and a risk-free life. As Ludwig von Mises noted, delegation of power is the main instrument of modern dictatorship. Ludwig von Mises, Bureaucracy, page 5. Tax revolts treat the symptoms, not the problem. The problem is the refusal of people to govern themselves. As long as they are in slavery to sin, they cannot be free men. Whosoever committeth sin is the servant or slave of sin. John chapter 8, verse 34. Only if the Son makes us free are we free indeed. John chapter 8, verse 36. Freedom requires risk. It means the risk of our money, our property, and our lives. Most people, when they talk about freedom, see it in radically irresponsible terms, as freedom from controls, from taxes, from moral duties and judgments, and so on and on. In effect, they are defining freedom as freedom from causality, and they believe in a fairy tale world. I recall some years ago at a college forum where I was one of the speakers, hearing a liberal, quote, economist, end quote, speak. He had been important in 3 administrations as a White House advisor. In his enthusiastic scenario of a liberal agenda, he concluded that, if his vision were adopted, then we can eat our cake and have it too. Such dreaming is now responsible for the world's growing economic nightmare. To seek the elimination of risks is to eliminate freedom. At the same time that we seek freedom, we must enhance responsibility. It is very important that we insist on the inseparable link between freedom and responsibility. This is well illustrated in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 8, which, in the Berkeley version, reads, When you build a new house, you must put a parapet around the roof, lest if someone falls to the ground, you bring blood guilt upon the house. This law refers to the flat-topped roofs of houses in those days. On warm summer nights, people ate, spent their evenings, and sometimes slept on the rooftop. To have such a roof without a strong railing to prevent falling was irresponsible and incurred, religiously and civilly, blood guilt. It was and is immoral to expose people needlessly to danger, and hence it was a punishable offence. Freedom means responsibility, not irresponsibility. However, no bureaucracy enforced the building of parapets or railings. Rather, it was the fact that a fall by a friend or guest could lead to a manslaughter charge at least, and heavy restitution, that morally controlled people and led to the routine construction of parapets. Irresponsibility was severely penalized. In discussing the philosophy of bureaucratism, Mises said that it leads to seeing good embodied in the state and evil materialized in the, quote, rugged individualism, end quote, of selfish men. The state then is always right, and the people always wrong. Page 74. How can such a condition develop? People must have a God. If they reject the living God of the Scripture, they turn to other sources for the good, to the state, to the free market, to reason, and so on, to a variety of false and homemade gods. When men worship false gods, they falsify their total being. The abler and the more educated they are, the more powerful and effective is the sway of evil in their lives. At this point, Mises's insight was telling. It is remarkable that the educated strata are more gullible than the less educated. The more enthusiastic supporters of Marxism, Nazism, and fascism were the intellectuals, not the boors. Page 108. The problem, however, with these gullible ones was not their education, but their lack of a biblical faith. We are told in Psalm 14 verse 1, "The fool hath said in his heart, There is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none that doeth good." David does not tell us that such men, infidels, do not believe there is a God. Indeed, as Paul tells us, all men know that God is, but they suppress this knowledge in their unrighteousness or injustice. Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 20. The fool tells himself there is no God to punish him, and, in his corruption, he then acts in contempt of God's law. All such action is irresponsible. To be irresponsible is to be irresponsible to the triune God, who made us and who has given us his law to live by. Irresponsibility is towards God, and therefore towards his creation and other men also. If we deny God, we deny his law and his moral order. We then refuse to believe there is a heaven, and certainly no hell. If there is no hell, there is no justice, and no risk. Hell means that there is a risk in living. People who believe in a hell-free life are commonly prone to believing in a risk-free life. For them, then, a bureaucracy is a good way of working towards a risk-free world. Bureaucracies are modern man's alternative to the providence of God. God's providence is our assurance that a moral order is basic to all creation, and that even a fallen world must move in terms of God's law. Tyrants may rise up, as did Sisera, but, as Deborah declares in her Song of Triumph, "They fought from heaven, the stars in their courses fought against Sisera." Judges chapter 5, verse 20. If men will not obey God's law, they will have man's law, and man's providence in the form of a bureaucracy. If men will not tithe and see themselves as responsible under God for a wide range of duties towards God and towards their neighbour, they will have an income tax, other taxes, and welfareism. There are no easy outs in God's world, as Paul tells us. "Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Again, "The wages of sin is death." Romans chapter 6, verse 23. And we can add, taxes also. We cannot have our cake and eat it too. We cannot have a risk-free and tax-free life. The more we try to remove risks from life, the more we create bureaucracies to remove money from us. But, first of all, we surrender freedom for slavery. There is one thing slaves have usually done well: whine about their slavery. I am weary of whiners. Piecemeal destruction, February 1987. An instructive episode from history is the treatment by the Turkish conquerors of the Near East of their Christian populations, which some scholars have admired. In some respects, the sultans, beginning with Mehmed II, gave more powers to the patriarchal offices of the churches by making them a part of the bureaucracy, giving them administrative duties and a role in the collection of taxes. At key points, however, the church was very seriously undermined. Its power to acquire and hold land and estates was largely wiped out, and also the church endowments. The independence and freedom of the church was thus destroyed, and it was all the more a dependent aspect of the imperial bureaucracy. Another very important power of the church was also almost eliminated: the freedom to maintain schools. Christians within the Turkish Empire had to travel abroad to enter Christian schools and colleges. This had the effect of freezing growth and paralyzing the intellectual and theological life of the churches. Another deadly control was a virtual ban on the ownership of presses by the church. The Patriarch, Cyril Lucaris of the Greek Orthodox Church, was educated in Europe, in Catholic and Protestant centres. He became a Calvinist and set up a press in Constantinople in 1627 to bring the scholarship of the West into the empire. Almost at once, the Turks destroyed the press, and Cyril was subsequently murdered. Every anti-Christian order strikes against these three areas in order to weaken and destroy the church. In the United States today, the freedom of Christian schools is especially threatened, but there are also some restrictions on estates and on the freedom of the Christian press.